Welcome back to the program. Is it possible that the weaponization of America's intel community actually didn't start with Barack Obama and actually started even before Barack Obama? Could it have started under George W. Bush? Well, there's some breaking news and information that actually points directly towards that. And in particular, James Clapper, or as I like to call him, James Crapper. Listen to this story. Tulsi Gabbard has revealed that deep state operative James Clapper's Russia hoax was not the first time that he created false intelligence. As a matter of fact, the entire Iraq war would have never started if it wasn't for Clapper's fake intelligence on the weapons of mass destruction lie. I got to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled and impressed beyond everything you could imagine about this Tulsi Gabbard. She is unbelievable. The bravery, the professionalism, she's going where others would not dare to go. Pray for her safety. That's what I would say to that. Now, let's talk about this. So the current Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is accusing former Obama Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, of being a serial political manipulator when it comes to false intelligence, exposing that the Russia collusion hoax was not his first rodeo in deception. Gabbard unloaded on the disgraced former DNI James Clapper during an appearance on the podcast Podforce One. Gabbard is accusing the longtime deep state operator of not one, but at least two of the most catastrophic intelligence failures in modern American history: the phony weapons of mass destruction narrative that dragged the United States into a forever war in Iraq, and of course the sham Russian collusion hoax used to undermine President Donald Trump. The weapons of mass destruction narrative refers to the false claims made by the United States government, primarily under President George W. Bush and his administration, that Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq possessed active WMDs, including chemical, biological, and potentially nuclear weapons. Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, CIA Director at the time George Tenet, and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice were central in pushing the WMD lie. Then Secretary of State Colin Powell famously presented the WMD case before the United Nations in February of 2003 using satellite photos and intercepts that later turned out to be deeply flawed or outright false. At the time, Crapper was the director of National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, which was responsible for analyzing satellite imagery and other geospatial intelligence. The NGA's assessment of potential Iraq WMDs and their sites contributed to the overall intelligence community's conclusion that Iraq indeed had such weapons. Crapper later conceded that the intelligence community's assessment was wrong. He's admitted this publicly, describing it as, quote, building a, quote, house of cards based on faulty assumptions that ultimately led to the conclusion that WMD were present when they, of course, were not. Quote, my fingerprints, this is what he says, my fingerprints are all over the infamous National Intelligence Assessment of October of 2002, he said during a 2018 event promoting his book, falsely named Facts and Fears, at George W.'s Jack Morton Auditorium. The intelligence community built a case in our minds. This is what he said. A house of cards, if you will. It turned out, and it led us to the conclusion with pretty high confidence, that there were And it turns out there were not any weapons of mass destruction, he added. Then he says, it represented closure for the country and closure for the intelligence community, and certainly personal closure. It was certainly a profound event, and I will never forget it, he said. Tulsi Gabbard says, James Clapper was on that team that created that manufactured intelligence assessment that led to the Iraq War. Now, let's think of how many people died because of that war alone, not to mention the fact that it went for, I don't know how many years. Was it 10, 15 something years? It was a really long time. Hundreds of thousands of people died. Many American soldiers gave their life fighting for Iraqi freedom, right? And for what? For more bullshit, more lies. You know what one of the biggest threats to the United States is besides the country of China? It was our own intelligence. That's right. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, all the branches of the intel community. Thank God we are exposing this and cleaning this up. You know, Clapper, or Crapper as I like to call him, was in an interview a couple of weeks ago, and I think the person on CNN or MSLSD said, are you worried that you're going to be caught up and be prosecuted? And he said, oh, I've thought about that for a long time. As a matter of fact, I've had perpetual legal representation since at least the early 2000s. Well, gee, maybe, just maybe, not only was he showing his guilt, but more importantly, he knew that maybe this was going to be found. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Unreal. Now, here is what Tulsi Gabbard said earlier today. Make sure the volume's up.
James Clapper was on the team that created that manufactured intelligence assessment that led to the Iraq War, about the Iraq WMDs. He writes about it in his book, saying that he and his team of intelligence analysts created something that was not there. When you look at his actions then, and you look at his actions in 2016 as Obama's director of national intelligence, you see someone who has no problem whatsoever politicizing and manufacturing and weaponizing intelligence for a political outcome.
Unbelievable. And isn't it interesting that he does this for the Iraq War, right? Then Obama comes in 2008, and what does he do? He makes him his director of national intelligence. Good job, Crapper. We appreciate the fact that you got us into this, quagmire in the Middle East, so we're going to reward you by giving you a promotion. This is why the left is dangerous. This is why they can never be in power, because they can't be trusted with our national security. That's the reason. And I hope this guy hangs, okay? I hope they all do, but him in particular, because not only once, but twice, he has a history of doing this. And look, these prosecutions, these indictments, they better lead to prosecutions. And from that prosecution and the indictments, we need to have convictions. We have got to have convictions. These people need to be held accountable, because if they're not, then they'll just do it again. And we cannot allow that to happen. So I don't know what's going to happen. I do know this. There's a hell of a lot more information coming out. There's going to be tons more drops from Tulsi and others. And like I said on yesterday's show, it's a criminal conspiracy. And a criminal conspiracy, ongoing and evolving. It hasn't stopped. And so what does that mean? That means that the head of the snake, Barack Obama, hopefully at some point will lose his presidential immunity, and he will face justice as well. God, I hope so. Okay, let's move on. So obviously we heard about this horrific shooting today, Fort Stewart, and whatever his name was, I don't know, something with a Q, Cornelius something or other, Radford or Bradford or whatever. The reason I don't really get into it and cover it too much is because you can get that news anywhere. It's the stuff that you don't get that I want to cover. The only thing that I heard, and thankfully the people are all okay, he was tackled by other soldiers. He knew all these people. He did not use a military weapon. He used his own personal firearm. He shot 5 people. Thankfully, I am hearing that they're all going to be okay. My thoughts and prayers, of course, go out to the victims of the shooting. There hasn't been a motive that they've discussed as of yet, so we'll see what happens. It just happened today, but again, just another horrible situation. Fort Hood, so many of these that have happened in the past, and you wonder what the motivation was. Were they on psychotropic drugs? That would be one thing. Did they have a history of mental illness, things like that? Did they lower the standards to allow more people into the military? I mean, who knows? There's going to be a lot more talk about that. So, wanted to cover that real quick. And then also this, Edward Corsetine, also known as Big Balls, really sad. He was in Washington, D.C., you probably already heard, and he saw a group of teenagers between 14 and 16 years old, about 10 of them or so, and he could hear them coming towards him and saying, "Yo, let's get that car, let's get that car." So, thinking on his feet quickly, what did he do? He immediately opened the door of the car, and he kind of pushed his girlfriend into the car and closed the door, and then confronted them and got into a fight with them, a confrontation. And sadly, they beat him pretty bad. I would say the only reason he's probably still alive is, thankfully, the DC police were very close by. They heard the commotion. They came over immediately, and they arrested a 15-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl. But it's pretty sick to know that you have gangs roving around in DC with all the money, all the power, all the greed, the lobbyists, everything else, right? The city is made of money. It is the mecca of money of the United States, basically. And yet you have roving teenage gangs killing people, murdering people, raping people, assaulting people, and everything else. Now, President Trump has said that he's giving the mayor of D.C., Bowser, a certain amount of time, and if she doesn't start changing her ways and cleaning up the streets, he's going to federalize the streets and federalize D.C. Now, as someone that is staunchly anti-big government and pro-federalism and not that type of a federalism, I have mixed feelings about this. I don't like to hear federalizing anything, to be quite honest, including any city. But from a safety standpoint, even if it's done temporarily, it might have to be. It might have to be because it is a dangerous, dangerous city. And again, Democrats run the city, do they not? Of course they do. And what do? They vote Democrat. So this is the result. This is what you're going to get in New York with Mom Donnie. This is what you're going to get in Los Angeles, in Portland, in Seattle. I don't have to go through it all. You already know, right? This is what happens. But this kid is a hero. Not only for what he did for Doge and trying to cut government spending and waste, fraud, and abuse. And I don't know, maybe he was targeted. I think it might have been random. I don't think they knew who he was. I don't think 15-year-olds are knowing who Ed Corsetine and Big Balls is. I mean, I doubt it. But he should be given some type of a reward from President Trump for his bravery. And I don't know if that's a medal, keys to the city, some type of celebration, but he is a hero for what he did. He took the beating to protect the girl, okay, and protect his girlfriend. And God bless him for doing that, because a lot of beta males out there would have ran with their tail between their legs, and they probably, who knows, would have been beaten in an alley somewhere crying like a little bitch. But he didn't do that. And so I give him a lot of credit for that. A lot of credit for that. Now, the other thing was ICE. Let's talk about this real quick, okay? We're going to do 3 and 1 on this one, and then I got one more, and then we're going to wrap it up. But we're still going to do 3 segments, even though this one is kind of 3 and 1. ICE has now lowered the age to 18 to be able to qualify if you want to work for ICE. They're giving incentives, they're giving bonuses to get people, and there's now no age limit as far as how old you can be as well. They said already 80,000 plus have applied. And that's wonderful. It's great. And why is it great? Because it shows that the American people are so behind President Trump and his deportation efforts that they want to facilitate them, exacerbate them, and make them happen so much quicker and faster. And hopefully they have, a vetting process. We don't want just anybody to want to infiltrate ICE, right? So I'm sure there's a vetting process. But I think it's great. I think it's great because we need a lot of people to join ICE. Alligator Alley, they're building another one on a former POW camp in Florida, I heard. So that's going to be the second Alligator Alley in a remote area with a long runway. So we are moving in the right direction. We are cleaning up the streets. We are cleaning up DC. We are cleaning up the rat's nest of people, the cesspool, the fraud, and everything else. And thank God we are. Because if, God forbid, they stole that election in 2024, man, we wouldn't have been dodging a bullet. We would have been dodging a GBU 157 that we dropped on Iran. That's what we would have been dodging. So thank God the Patriots came out. Thank God President Trump is back in office to help make America great again. Now, one more segment, and then we're going to cut out. I got to tell you this. We are finally at a point where it certainly looks as though the Department of Justice is taking election integrity seriously. I've already reported a while back, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago tops, about how they're going through all 50 states, all the voter rolls. They're going to get rid of the dead voters. They're going to get rid of the duplicate voters. They're going to get rid of the people that moved out of the city or the state that they were first registered in and all that good stuff. I'm also hearing there's some movement, believe it or not, in Fulton County, which of course we know what happened when they pulled suitcases out from underneath the table and stuffed 10 to 15 to 25 of the same ballot through the machine until it was practically smoking, right? And so I'm hearing that Fulton County is now going to be conducting another investigation. Voter GA, my buddy Garland Favorito, is been reporting on that as well. So we're moving in the right direction. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon launches a legal blitz to clean up the voter rolls and dismantle the Democrats' illegal race-based gerrymandering. Quote, "We are making it easier to vote and harder to cheat." That's what she said. In a powerful video statement released on X, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon pulled no punches as she announced a sweeping new legal crackdown aimed at securing America's elections and ripping apart the Democrats' web of gerrymandered districts and bloated voter rolls. Dillon, serving under the leadership of President Donald Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi, declared that her office is taking direct aim at, quote, illegal race-based gerrymandering and widespread voter roll irregularities that have plagued Democrat strongholds for decades. Dillon's Civil Rights Division has already launched lawsuits against states like North Carolina for failing to properly verify voter eligibility. She is also putting Texas on notice for drawing congressional districts allegedly based on racial motivations. Our constitutional duty is to protect the right to vote for all Americans. 60 years ago, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to confront the brutal reality that too many Americans were being denied their rightful access to the ballot. The Voting Rights Act came at a critical time in our nation's history and was the catalyst for necessary change. This landmark law removed barriers for voting, it outlawed poll taxes and literacy tests, and gave the federal government the tools to stop discriminatory barriers at the ballot box. Today, under the leadership of President Donald Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Civil Rights Division is continuing to protect equal and transparent ballot access. With vigilance and resolve, we are investigating violations of federal voting laws. We ensure that all 50 states have and continue to have clean voter rolls. We are challenging efforts to suppress or dilute the vote. We are attacking illegal race-based gerrymandering, and we are protecting ballot access for all Americans. We have sued jurisdictions such as North Carolina for not registering voters properly by first verifying their eligibility. And we have notified other blue states that we have grave concerns about their congressional districts and how they have been drawn with racial motivations. We are using other jurisdictions where there is evidence of ineligible voters on the voter rolls. Our job is to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. On the anniversary, we honor the Voting Rights Act, not just by remembering it, but by enforcing it for all Americans, and that is my promise to you. So the only thing that I was a little concerned with is she mentioned Texas. I think what Texas is doing right now is absolutely not only legal, fundamental, constitutional, and just. They are basically taking Houston, and they're taking San Antonio, and they're taking areas near Dallas, and they're changing them, and they're changing them so that they are more red. Why? Well, because the Democrats gerrymandered that for so long that's why they're doing this. And again, for them to speak out and say that somehow we're gerrymandering, they've been doing it for decades. Look at Illinois. Look at Colorado now. I mean, look at even areas of Florida were gerrymandered. Obviously, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I mean, the list is endless of how many states, in blue states in particular, that they have squeezed out Republicans, okay? And they can't compete. And it's unfair. So I'm not sure what she's talking about with Texas, but she is talking also about the blue states as well. Texas is not doing anything wrong here. Texas is doing what they should have done probably decades ago. So I'm glad to see that they are looking at this with an approach to dismantle gerrymandering. And if that's what their goal is, then they might as well camp out in all the blue states, because that's where it exists. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.